Run It Studios is the home of the Run Radio podcast and runradio.net, a podcast and station about the relentless, resilient, and innovative types, inspiring strides in life, business, and beyond. Welcome back to the Run Radio podcast. My name is Trina Wilcox, and my guest today knows a thing or two about resilience and tenacity, which is one of the things we talk about a lot on the Run Radio podcast, running things literally and metaphorically. So I want to welcome today Risa August.
Hi, Trina. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad to hear that you are taking your experience and making it available for other people to glean knowledge and information from. So let's go back a ways and tell me how all this began for you.
Yes, well, I had just it was 2010. I had just finished my first Ironman race. I got really obsessive and into triathlons, and I finally worked my way up to a full Ironman distance, and I finished the race. Felt pretty good. And then a few months after, a friend of mine asked me to do a 500-mile endurance bicycle journey with her. And I struggled to get through it. And, in her mind, she's like, but you're an Ironman athlete. Like what? And I was really struggling. And I also started noticing significant changes in my body. Like excessive weight gain in a short amount of time, despite having a very regimented diet and training routine. Changes in hair growth, changes in bone structure and joints, and just odd things happening that I couldn't explain. So I began seeing doctors, and I kept getting dismissed. You're an athlete. We're not worried, or your blood work's fine, or and I said, but I'm pretty in tune with my body, and something's off. And so it took about 7 years to finally get diagnosed with a tumor on my pituitary gland and a disease called acromegaly.
Well, what is that? That's something I've not heard of before.
Yeah, so acromegaly is caused by a tumor on the pituitary gland, and it causes excessive growth hormone um being dumped in my body. So it's like suddenly the pituitary can't function properly, and so all this growth hormones being dumped into my body, so everything's growing.
Mm.
um my bones, my tissues, hair growth, all of it, my organs, everything's growing and changing. And it's very destructive, actually, and could be essentially could be terminal. So it explained a lot, and I felt validated, finally, and that was a huge turning point in my journey, but also a huge realization of, wow, I'm never going to be the same person that I was.
So, how did you finally get them to pay attention? I'm so glad you were persistent because a lot of times you get that way when blood work's not coming back and test results are dead ends. It's difficult to keep saying something's not right. This is not right. Because they're just looking at you and going, well, the paperwork says it is. And try this, doctor. Maybe they'll find something. How did you find it in you to keep saying, no, I've got to advocate for myself?
Yes, well, there's part of me that wants to believe there was some kind of divine intervention. I remember going back to the doctor, and so just a little bit of background on me. I never actually went to doctors. I didn't even take ibuprofen. I was very much into the holistic approach to health and wellness.
Mhm.
And so going to medical doctors was this new thing to me. So I go into this primary care physician and I'm like, I am having these severe headaches that I cannot get rid of. It doesn't matter how much water I drink, nothing. And she was like, well, maybe you need to drink more water, or maybe you are overtraining.
Yeah.
Um, and and I said, well, can we just order an MRI just to rule anything out?
Mhm.
No, I don't think you need one. Your blood work's fine. You're really fit and you're an athlete. And I said, well, how do you explain this 40-pound weight gain? And she's like, I'm still not worried. And I said, well, let's just get an MRI. I hope it comes back clean. She said, no, I don't think you need one, and they're very expensive. And so this is where I think the divine intervention comes in. I would be like, okay, that's what they said. I don't need one, so I don't need one. But something in me that day was like, no, no, you need to get this done. And I just said, order me the MRI. And she turned to her desk and starts typing, shaking her head. Okay, I don't think you need one. And 1 week later, I had an email from her at following the MRI saying, you have an enlarged pituitary, go see an endocrinologist.
And I'm sure that was the extent of it. No admission to any
No,
pushback on her end.
no, no, I'm sorry. I
Of
should have
course not.
listened. Yeah, nothing,
Well,
nothing.
thankfully you went, and then so that from there you got something you could work with, a
Yes,
diagnosis to work with.
yes. I still didn't know. It was a very surreal moment being in the endocrinologist's office. I didn't even, before I went in, I didn't even know what an endocrinologist
Oh
was.
goodness,
Um,
yeah.
I'm staring at my skull on the screen, and there's this big gray blob, crammed in my skull, and she's like, this has to come out. And there's this athlete part of me that's like, okay, well, like, when can we get this done? I have to get on with my life and get back to training.
Got a race to do. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And she was like, "Oh, wait, but that's not all. It comes with this very destructive disease. That's and she didn't say these words exactly, but it's essentially going to change your life forever." But the one thing I cared about in that moment was validation.
Yeah,
Like, I knew something was wrong, and I finally had that validation.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're so right. Just having that validation, something to work with, even though it's not ideal. So when you had that, you realized things were going to change. What did you do? Because I know the dedication that goes into training. I get that. And when it's in your heart and soul, it's hard just to say, well, okay, I'll just take a few rest days, or I'll just, do some light walking. It's just not the same. So how did you adjust?
Yes, well, it was definitely a process, and I didn't actually know right away how much it was gonna change my body and my life. So there was that part of me that was like, "Okay, well, when can we get this done?" And I remember going in to schedule my brain surgery, and I told the doctor, the neurosurgeon, I said, "Look, I have a 250-mile endurance ride in 6 weeks post surgery. Like, I need to make sure am I going to be able to do that?" And he just stared at me like I had two heads. He's
Mm.
like, "You're not going to be allowed to drive, let alone get on a bike." So, um, he just thought he thought I was joking. And so following the brain surgery, some of the tumor was inoperable, so I had to go on and have 6 weeks of radiation therapy, and, so about 6 months post, brain surgery and radiation treatments, I was stuck on the couch.
Mm.
I was like, "What just," you have all this time to reflect, and you're like, "Wait, what just happened?" Like, this was my life, and now I can't get off the couch out of a pair of sweatpants. I had these gnarly, tattered gray sweatpants I was, like, living in, and I
Mm.
couldn't even walk to the mailbox, and I was just trying to make sense of all of, like, what happened? And that's when it started sinking in that my life would really never be the same. My body wouldn't function the same anymore. My brain and cognition wouldn't be the same anymore. And I said, okay, if I stay here, and this might sound a little over dramatic, but for me, this is what it felt like. If I lay on this couch another day, I'm gonna die. Like, I
Mhm.
need something to live for.
Yeah.
And that was the day I decided I signed up for a 1,800-mile bicycle journey from Canada to Mexico, and I had 14 months to get there. I didn't know how on earth I was gonna make that happen, but I knew, like, I had to get off that couch.
Yeah. So did you make the goal?
So I did. So the first step, I had to start breaking things down into smaller attainable things, and so the first thing I did was get out of those sweatpants. And
Good.
exactly, and I started changing up my routine, and instead of going right to the couch, I started painting. I'm not even an artist. But I needed to start changing things,
Mhm.
and eventually I made it to the mailbox, and then eventually I was on my bike trainer in the basement doing 5 minutes
Yeah.
of riding, and then my first ride outside was 8 miles, which, if anyone knows, for an endurance athlete, 8 miles is a great ride for a day, but as an endurance athlete, it's like, well, maybe disappointing.
Yeah. You start comparing it to, well, I used to do this, or this is not my it's not my norm. And you know it's not what you were capable of before you were given these intense obstacles.
Exactly,
So I'm glad you were able to reframe your focus. That's so important for everybody in so many situations. That's applicable in so many aspects of life. But I also know, I feel like I know that as someone that still feels the loss of that, how did you move through those changes and deal with the new normal, for a lack of a better phrase?
yes. Well, I think I realized it was gonna be a process. I was very resistant at first. I was
Yeah.
like, "Nope, I'm gonna show everyone, I'm gonna prove to everyone and myself that this isn't gonna take me down. I'm gonna do things my way, the way I've always done them." And so there was this resistance to that, and there was a lot of grief work of letting go of who I used to be, who I was, that old identity, and starting to embrace, focusing less on what I can't do and focusing more on what I can do. And
Mhm.
it really opened up my world to, oh my gosh, I've actually been missing out on a lot.
Oh, yeah?
And I started trying all these new things, and challenging myself in different ways. So I may never be able to do another Ironman race, but I ended up biking across northern Spain.
Mhm.
And then I started taking dance classes to help with my cognition and my brain to body connection. And I started taking theater classes and improv and art classes, and just I even took an aerial silks class at a
Yeah.
school. So I just started. It just opened my world up of, like, wait a minute. there's actually all these other amazing things out there that I can be doing.
Yeah. At what point did you realize other people would benefit from this and start doing the speaking, the coaching, the book writing?
Mhm. Uh, that kind of just started on it was also a process. I knew I wanted to write my story, and writing
Mhm.
a book was always on a bucket my bucket list, and I was in that place of I'm going to do all the things on my bucket list, and I had no idea how me simply sharing my story and my journey during that 1,800-mile bike ride and through diagnosis. I had no idea how that was gonna impact people.
Mhm.
And I remember hearing for the first time from people who weren't my family or my friends saying how much my story has inspired them. And I started bawling because I just like, what? Really? And so things started to continue unfold from there, and I started thinking, gosh, as I started coaching, if people just shifted their mindsets, just even the slightest bit, kind of like
Mhm.
a kaleidoscope, you just
Yeah.
the slightest bit, and it can change the whole view, the whole perspective. And I thought, okay, I gotta tell people this.
So when you talk about that, just a small refocus can make a huge difference. And like we were talking about, you can apply that in so many different aspects and different things people are going through. So, what is one of those simple ways we can refocus? Because sometimes when you are down in the dumps and you're just trying to get by, it's really hard to adjust that lens.
Yes, yes. Well, for like first of all, I started looking at obstacles not as like blocks, like not as like roadblocks, but just something to navigate.
Hmm.
So, okay, so what now? And then again, I stopped focusing on what I can't do, and I started asking myself. I do this in moments where I'm feeling like challenged or stuck. I ask myself, okay, what can I do? And I turned the word can into a mantra. I took each letter from the word can, and turned it into a mantra: capable, able, now. What am I capable and able to do now
Hmm.
in this moment? What can I do? And sometimes it's just getting out of those sweatpants.
Yeah.
And then it leads to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And it really helped, because it can become so overwhelming of like, you look at a goal or something that's like way over there, or way out there and far away. And I had to just start bringing myself to the right here and now. It's like, wait a minute, okay, what's a step I can take toward this, and stop focusing on, um, what I can't do.
How long ago was your diagnosis?
I was diagnosed at the end of 2018, and my surgery and all my treatments started in the beginning of 2019, and I still am on that journey.
Yeah.
My disease isn't regulated. I'm still battling. I don't want to say battling. I want to say living with the changes and navigating. Um, the things that are coming up for me,
Yeah.
and but yeah, I'm looking at it much differently than I used to.
Good.
Mhm.
Is this something that will change a lot, or do you anticipate a leveling out phase where things will stabilize and you'll be able to rely on certain things more often?
Yeah, I think based on other patients and research, if it was going to level out, it would have leveled out by now.
Oh,
And so I'm now working with new things like the impact radiation treatments had on my brain,
okay.
um and the continual changes in my body and how it functions. So, but again, I feel like now I have the tools
Yeah.
to work with it. Like, okay, so what now? What next?
Is the prognosis something that you expect to be able to manage and just deal with, or is it going to continue to have a downward spiral? Is
I
that
mean,
just depend on the person or
yeah, each person's experience is unique to them, right?
right.
So, I think I'm in this new stage of I'm not sure that I'm going to get better, that I'm going to
Right.
improve.
Right.
Um, so what can I do to maintain where I'm at
Yeah.
now? Well, I
Good.
can eat healthier, I can exercise, and just focus on, a mindset and reaching and attaining the things I want to attain in this life, and my bucket list just continues to grow.
What are some of the things on your list?
I've been checking a lot off in the over
Good.
the few years. I've done all kinds of things like axe throwing, and I've told you like aerial silks and riding across northern Spain and hiking, trekking in Peru, and completing the 1,800-mile bike ride I did. And now I want to bike from Switzerland to the Netherlands along the Rhine River,
Yeah.
and I want to finish my second book, and I'm almost finishing up my screenplay for my first book. And, um, I would love to see a feature length film created out of that. And, um, yeah, I keep adding to the list. So,
Good. Aside of activities like outdoors and stuff, what are some of the other things you discovered? You mentioned painting. What
Mhm.
are some of the other things that you've, you know, started picking up along the way?
Sure. I was living in Oregon for a short time, and I went to a large art market there. So where there's all these art vendors there, and oops, excuse me, sorry for that. And and I remember coming across this booth, and this woman was putting these sparkly things in people's hair.
Mhm.
And I was like, "I want some of those." And I just thought they looked fabulous, and every woman that walked away from that booth was just beaming. And so I got some in my hair, and then I talked with her and I said, "How can I do this? How can
Oh,
I spread this same joy?" And so I became a mobile partner, and so I now add sparkly strands of silk in
I love it.
other people's hair.
I do see yours. They look great. I do. You're right. They do just spark a little joy, don't they?
Yes, yes.
Let's talk a little bit about your first book and what your second book is going to be about.
So yeah, so my first book called The Road Unpaved, Border to Border with a Brain Tumor and a Bike. It's about my journey. I started at the Canadian border on the Pacific coast, and it's about my journey down the Pacific coast to the US and Mexican border. But it flashes back through diagnosis, through other challenges I was going with my life of deciding if I was going to get a divorce and or stay in my marriage. And and there was some really challenging things happening. And how I went into this bike ride determined to have it all figured out, and quickly realizing that's not how life works. and and it was a lot of fun, and it's really a good it's I write how I see the world.
Mhm.
I'm very playful, and I can even find humor in dark moments. And so I love that it's really my voice. on the pages, in between the pages. So, and my second book is a continuation of this story, because again, I wasn't expecting for my first book to, I mean, it's won 5 awards so far, and it's just had incredible feedback and reviews, and one of the things people kept asking me is like, "I wanna know what happens next."
All right.
And
Well,
so it's a continuation of that, and this time the bike journey will be across northern Spain.
okay. Well, you'll have to go do that journey and then come and follow up and tell us all about it. Sound good?
Yes, you got it.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing. Tell people where they can go to find your book and learn more about connecting with you.
Sure, you can find me at risaaugust.com, and it's Rissa with one S, August, just like the month.com, and you can find out about my book and hair sparkling all there.
I love it. Thank you so much. Come back anytime.
Thank you so much. Grateful to be here. Thanks again.
You can find more videos, link over to watch or listen to whichever platform you prefer from runitstudios.com.